The worst times to be born in human history. You might think you have things pretty hard right now, but if you have a roof over your head, access to clean water and electricity, and people around you that care about you, you've got a lot to be grateful for. A lot of the modern luxuries that we take for granted today didn't even exist 100 years ago, which just makes you think, if almost everything I enjoy right now didn't exist 100 years ago, what did life look like 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago? Well, in this video, we are going to dive into all the worst time periods to ever be born into. Everybody knows that the Roman Empire fell, but not many people talk about the time between the Roman Empire falling and the beginning of the Middle Ages. This period of time is referred to as the Late Antiquity, and it is a major time of political instability and a huge power shift in global politics at the time. Late Antiquity typically refers to anywhere from 200 AD to 700 AD, but for this section specifically, I'm going to be focusing on like 450 AD to 700 AD, because following the official end of the Roman Empire in 476 AD, a lot of things continued to happen and change until the end of the Late Antiquity in the beginning of the Middle Ages. Whenever there is a large change in almost any aspect of life, there is growing pains associated with it, because change is scary and difficult. And in the context of the Late Antiquity, anybody living in the Roman Empire was experiencing a huge cultural, political, and spiritual shift that had not been seen realistically for hundreds of years. This topic is undoubtedly extremely complex and nuanced, but I'm going to do my best to provide as much context as possible to describe why this time period would have sucked to be born and live in. And one of the biggest reasons for a lot of the hardships that people faced during this time was the widespread political instability, specifically because the empire that had controlled and mismanaged the entire geographical area for the last hundreds of years was no longer, meaning that by default, there was a power vacuum that people were hungry to fill. And of course, with the fall of one of the most iconic empires of all time, you also lose a lot of long-standing institutions, specifically armies, defense, banking, really anything that provided safety and stability to the people of Rome. Even before the fall of the Roman Empire, Rome was consistently under attack from different groups. But during the Late Antiquity, there was much less resources and manpower to fight off barbarian tribes like the Goths, the Vandals, the Huns, which meant that these barbarian tribes were extremely motivated because they knew that the big bad Roman Empire was not what it used to be. And what this resulted in was frequent wars, raids, and destruction across all of Europe and the Mediterranean, which for soldiers was devastating because at this point, soldiers were not as well equipped as they used to be, meaning that they were typically at a disadvantage during these attacks. And for civilians, that meant that they were simply less protected, making them vulnerable to barbarian raids, which is something you definitely do not want to be vulnerable to. On top of defenses being diminished and wars and raids being more frequent, there was also a huge economic decline, which was almost perfectly coupled with the political instability. And because of this, massive trade network shrank. Major culturally significant cities were destroyed and abandoned, and even agriculture was affected due to these consistent invasions. We think about ancient Roman and ancient Greek ruins today as this thing that existed only far in the past, but during the Late Antiquity, major Roman and Greek cities and institutions and buildings that were active and respected only 100 or a few hundred years ago were now in ruins, with the majority of these culturally significant locations either being destroyed in raids, left to rot because there's nobody to use them or maintain them because of the city's depopulation, or if these buildings were still in decent shape in a city that was somewhat populated or repopulating, a lot of these buildings were actually deconstructed from the inside out to be used for new buildings. For example, ceramic and bricks were taken from old antiquity buildings and used to build new churches. The Late Antiquity is an interesting period of history because it is regarded as one of the most transitional periods, as it was at the dawn of the rise of Christianity. And because of that, there was a lot of conflict surrounding other religions in the area. But for that reason, a lot of people see this time period as an opportunity and as something to be celebrated. And while that is definitely something to consider, the Late Antiquity is one of the most significant examples of transitioning from the old world to the new world. And living through that was not easy whatsoever.